Happy Monday, everyone. I know many of you just had an amazing Valentine's Day weekend. Shout out to my bestie, Brittany, for us being able to celebrate her birthday this weekend. And welcome to the Other Side podcast. My name is Janelle Villiers. I am your host. And what you are witnessing, anyone who's tuning in right now, you are witnessing me going through a transition. I have been spending a lot of time talking about the mental health journey, and I am still very passionate about that, and will continue to talk about that from time to time. However, I am bringing on a whole new focus, which is to talk about the journey of being a self-published author. There are many aspiring authors out there, and so I want to be able to support you, give you real strategies, real tips on how to make your writing better, how to make the process of self-publishing smoother, the editing, all of the things. So I want to make sure I capture both of those things. So today we're going to be focusing more on the writing and self-publishing journey, specifically the writing journey for all of my aspiring authors out there. I truly believe that a book can change a person's life. How do I know this is possible? Because it happened to me. Several books actually have changed my life, have given me a total new perspective on how to view things and see things. And so I really feel truly blessed to be able to help people get this amazing book idea out of their head and onto paper, so that way they can publish with pride, knowing that they're going to impact the people they've been called to impact on this earth. So for today's topic, I really wanted to get into something that I was talking to some of my clients about earlier, which is your writing boring? It's possible that your scenes seem to fall flat in your writing. And I really wanted to get into this and how we can do certain things to make the scenes more lively, to get to engage the reader, to suck them in, to make them want to flip the page and read the next thing, right? So let's talk about some techniques and some ways in which we can do that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the number one mistake that kills scenes instantly. And it's just using emotional distance. You have these abstract descriptions. You don't use any sensory details. And you just kind of like summarize the emotions rather than depicting them. And it's almost like you're staying in the character's head instead of like in the moment and like what they're doing and how they're acting in the moment. So for that reason, one of the things that I like to really focus on with my clients is that when you're writing, it's really important when you're describing a scene to use all of the senses. So that means, what does it taste like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What is the character hearing? What are they touching, right? You want to use all of the five senses to be able to describe a particular scene. And so we actually go through some exercises where I show them a scene, maybe it's on a snow-capped mountain, and then describe, using all of the senses, describe what you see, hear, feel, smell, right? Describe all of that. And then I give them another scene. And then we up the antics. And we're like, all right, now same scene, it's a snow-capped mountain, but now you see individuals in ski gear and they're actually on the mountain and it looks like they're skiing. What are you saying now about this particular scene? How would you describe it now? So it just gets people to start thinking more deeply about a situation. You can say, oh, it's a freezing cold mountain. Or you can say, I felt the icy wind across my face. It made my nose run. My fingers almost went numb. I felt isolated and alone because it was just me. The wind echoed in the breeze or something, or like the snow was so bright, it was the sun bouncing off, it was blinding, right? Like you could just say so much more when you use all of the senses. So here's an example of something that would be a bad way of writing something with this emotional distance versus a better way of doing it, right? So here's some emotional distance. A description would be, Sarah was angry about the betrayal. She couldn't believe her best friend would do this to her. She felt hurt and upset. Okay, not horrible, but what could be better? Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the text message. Her best friend's words blurred through tears. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the kitchen tile as bile rose in her throat. Right? So you're getting a lot of sensing of like what she's feeling, what her body is going through, right? The trembling of her hands, the bile in her throat. All of this is way more descriptive as to like what she's going through than to just say like, oh, she felt betrayed. So that's an example. All right, so now let's get into the second thing I wanted us to talk about, which is, so how do you transform telling into showing and vivid showing? So the number one is using sensory integration. Every sense, all five senses. And when you're doing the five senses, when you're describing a particular scene, the other thing that you want to think about is the emotional reactions of the characters. You really, instead of just like what we just read, instead of just saying what they felt, I felt betrayed, or they felt sad or angry, or whatever, you want to describe their reactions. Like, what is the physical reaction of their body due to these emotions? If someone is scared, like all of a sudden they like had this, their heart starts to race, right? Their hands start to get sweaty. All of those things. Right? Now I'm thinking of Eminem and it's the 8 Mile, right? You lose the Simone, palms are sweaty, mom spaghetti, all that thing. Anyway, if you know the lyrics, go ahead and put those in the comments. I don't remember all the comments, but you know what I'm talking about. So the other thing about so number one, you want to use all five senses, right? Number two, you want to show the physical reactions to emotions. And then you want to use, so when you're thinking about the emotions, you want to use action-based emotions. So when you reveal the emotions through behavior, when you reveal the feelings that they're having through behavior, this is so much stronger than just saying they were in grief, right? You could say like, her body rocked back and forth, overwhelmed with the grief that she was feeling, right? Like, or her body rocked back and forth while the tears streamed uncontrollably from her eyes, that kind of a thing. So it's giving action to the feelings, putting behavior behind the feelings. And then the other thing is you might want to also use the settings to create mood. Sometimes the environment that someone's in can also create an atmosphere with which you can understand how the character is reacting and progressing. So those are really good things. So how to transform telling into showing using all five senses. That's number one. Number two, you want to create action-based emotion. So take the feelings and show the feelings through behavior, through actions. And the third thing is you want to give a really good detail as to the environment. That's what you use the five senses for, to describe the environment that the character is in. So let's go through another example. So an okay example, right? And this is telling versus telling to showing. Is John was nervous about his presentation. The conference room was intimidating and his boss was watching him critically. He felt like he might fail. Okay, but what could be better? John's dress shirt stuck to his back as he faced the conference room. His laser pointer danced across the screen, betraying his shaking hand. In the front row, his boss's pen scratched against the evaluation form, each mark like a tiny stab. Right? So much better. A lot of action there. You got the shirt stuck to his back, right? Obviously, he's the anxiety sweat, right? The stress sweat. The laser pointer is shaking because his hands are shaking. And I even loved like the idea of using the pointer is shaking, which then like takes the reader to understand like the hand is shaking because it's the only way that the pointer would be shaking, right? So isn't that really cool, a way of describing the hands are shaking instead of just saying, oh, his hands were shaking, right? But you see it. There's an action there. And then the boss's scratch against the evaluation form, each mark like a tiny stab. Again, this like critical, oh my goodness, this feels awful being criticized, like each stroke a tiny stab. So just again, thinking about how you can take what you are planning to write, instead of just saying what it is, like really bringing the reader in by showing them using what we just talked about, five senses, turning emotions and feelings into actions and behavior, and then describing the atmosphere. In this case, they were in the conference room, that type of thing. Okay. So now let's get into some of the hooks. So what are some of the pro techniques that authors use to hook readers. The number one thing I would say is emotional anchoring. So um, they open with a character that's in motion. It creates like this immediate, like, okay, what's going on? What are they doing? Like the reader almost has to catch up, right? And so you kind of like plant these questions that need answers, right? Because we're trying to figure out like what's going on. They're already in motion. So that's a really great way to hook people in and get them wanting to read more. The second thing is scene structure. So essentially, I've heard someone say you want to start late and leave early. It's the same thing, right? Like it's kind of like a character in motion. Like immediately you're catching them like in the middle of the scene, not like when the scene began, but they're like in the middle of what's happening in their lives. And so you can build better tension through this kind of escalation. And then you end the scene with like forward momentum, meaning like, okay, what's next? Something else is coming after this, which is always really good because again, it gets the reader to want to flip the page. The third thing that professionals do to hook readers is they use subtext, right? Through dialogue. I have said this to so many of my clients. I say this to so many people who are thinking about becoming my clients, that people underestimate how much dialogue can be used to move a story along, to progress a story, to bring a reader in. Like when you read the dialogue, you almost feel like you're a fly on the wall in the room where this conversation is taking place, right? And it just moves the story forward in a way that, like, if you just described what somebody was feeling, it just doesn't do it in that way. The queen of dialogue is Jane Austen. Pick up any Jane Austen book, Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, any one of them, and I guarantee you will see a master in dialogue. That's the idea that you can put one like piece of dialogue above the other. It doesn't always have to be followed by he said, she said, he said, she said, right? You can say like said emphatically or said while rolling their eyes, or you can say those things, of course. But just this use of dialogue to really bring a story through, and then like it captivates the audience. It just makes them want to continue reading because they feel like they're in the story. And I really feel like people underutilize dialogue. They just like describe a scene. But I'm like, but they describe, oh, these two people had a conversation and then this conversation got them upset or got mad. And it's like, no. What if you actually put the dialogue? Tina said, and then describe what Tina said. Oh, I can't believe that you decided to wear this to work today. And then the response back was like, well, yeah, I heard it was, casual Fridays. So I thought everything was good. No, we don't do casual Fridays here anymore. What do you mean? Like, I didn't get the memo from that, right? Like now, instead of describing, Tina didn't know that they no longer did casual Fridays anymore. And so she was really embarrassed. But like, see the difference between a dialogue and you talking about that versus just describing it. So again, this really hooks readers in. It gets them in. It makes them want to know more. Really great techniques there. So if I was going to give you an example of this, it might sound like one of the ways to hook readers, right? So a flat opening would be, it was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Emma went to work like she always did. She had no idea something bad was about to happen. Okay. Not horrible, right? But it's a little bit flat compared to something that's more with a hook. Emma's phone buzzed 3 times in her pocket as she stepped into the elevator. Wrong day to be late. Wrong day to ignore her mother's calls. Wrong day to forget the forensics report that would expose everything. Dun, 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 right? So remember we talked about like one of the techniques is to immediately put a character into motion. So this is a great example of that. Emma's phone buzzed 3 times in her pocket as she stepped into the elevator. What was happening before Emma got into the elevator? Why is the phone ringing 3 times? Like, why is she ignoring the call? Who's calling? I mean, we get a little bit of like, it was her mom's calls, right? But all of this, like immediately the reader is going to have questions and they're going to want to continue reading so they can get some of the answers to those questions. So there's this forward momentum in the fact that you put the character in action immediately. It's a great way to hook people in. So I hope that this is helpful for you guys. I know for many of the people I talk to, these are things that they don't even consider. So I really want you guys to write in a way that is compelling, that makes the readers continue on to reading, because ultimately I know that your book is going to create a huge impact in at least one person's life, right? But I know many people as well. So as a summary, you guys know I always like to summarize. We talked about the number one mistake that kills a scene instantly is this emotional distance, using abstract descriptions instead of the sensory details. So the ways in which you can transform from telling to showing, use the 5 sentence when describing the scene. You're going to want to take any emotions and feelings and turn them into action or behavior. And you're going to really want to set up the environment to help explain what is happening for the character. And then lastly, we talked about the secret techniques that professional authors use to hook readers. The number one is the way that they open with a character in motion. Number two is they start late, leave early. They're going to build tension through the escalation to get people hooked to want to know what's going to happen next. And the third is using dialogue to really hook people in. All right, everyone, please save this for later, because someone out there, I know you're going to be like, oh man, what did she say about this? How can I make this better here, there? So make sure you save this for later. Tag me, let me know your comments. If you found this valuable, let me know in the chat. Put a V in the chat if you found this valuable. I really want to know. I really want to hear from you. If you have struggled with this in the past, please let me know too. I would love to engage in dialogue around any and all of these topics. And this has been a great time spent with you. So I can't wait to see you next week. Have an amazing evening, everyone. Take care.